On this video, I'm finally taking a look at Whistle Mountain. I've been wanting to try this out for so long, but I've just had such a backlog. Finally, now I get to try it out. The question is, did my patience pay off? Hi, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple. If you like what you see after you've watched this video, consider subscribing and please share it on social media. I'd very much appreciate it. Whistle Mountain is a late 2020 game released by Bezier Games and designed by Scott Caputo, who did Whistle Stop, and Luke Laurie, who has also done, well, Dwellings of Eldervale, if anyone's ever heard of that one, I guess, and of course the Manhattan Project Energy Empire game. Now, this question gets asked all the time, and I'm just going to get out of the way now. People have asked, is this a direct sequel to Whistle Stop? How do they compare? What are the similarities? Well, I'm going to go through every single one of those similarities for you right now. They're both designed by Scott Caputo, they both have whistles in the title, they both use whistles as wild resources, they're both published by Bezier Games, they both have a similar art style, and they're both on the lighter end of midweight Euros. Yeah, that's basically it, people. There is very little in common with these two games. One is not the direct sequel of another. Do not go into Whistle Mountain because you like Whistle Stop, and vice versa. You're just setting yourself up for disappointment. So allow me to tell you what Whistle Mountain is like in its own way. Years have passed since your successful foray across the great American West, stopping at tiny little whistle stops while building a massive railroad empire. It's not a sequel! Now you're investing your massive profits in new technologies deep in the Rocky Mountains where there is an abundance of water, coal, iron, gold, and of course whistles. Your goal is to score the most victory points by building fantastic machines, improving your company and training your workers to use the resources of Whistle Mountain. But be careful because as you build higher, the snow begins to melt, raising the water level higher and higher. Players will use their airship workers in a number of ways. First, you can go around the side of the board and collect machines and scaffolding for building, cards for special bonuses, and upgrades for special abilities that will remain permanent throughout the game. You can also land your airships in a central grid in the middle of the board, which will be built up over time by the players. Scaffoldings go in first to lay the foundations, of which machines can be built on top. These machines not only give victory points, but also special bonuses when the machine is utilised by having the machine either land on top of it or adjacent to it. All the while, players will be looking to move their workers out of the barracks onto the scaffolding in order to promote them to the tower later for special award tiles and victory points. However, as the scaffolding gets higher, the water level also rises, which causes machines to fall out of action and become broken for the rest of the game. On top of this, if your worker happens to get caught in the rising flood, they get sent to the whirlpool below where they basically spin around all day until you eventually get them out. And you're going to want to do so because it's negative points.
She needs to sort out her priorities.
The game continues in this fashion of placing airships and retrieving them in order to build on the central grid until eventually the water level rises to such a height that the game end is triggered, and of course, once you count up the points, have a guess what happens to the one with the most.
Of course!
Typically you're looking at a 90-minute duration for this game, however it can swing a little depending on player count. 2 players you could wrap this up in about an hour, but you'd need to be fairly familiar with the game's mechanics. But then with a 4 player you could be looking at a good 2 hours in order to get through this game. A lot of it depends on how that central grid is built up. If it's built up really quickly so that the flood level rises at a rapid rate, the game's going to end a little bit sooner than you might expect. But if everybody takes their time to build pretty much as much scaffolding as you can in the lower levels before it gets to the bridge, then you'll find that the game might go on a little bit longer. But I've never had a game of this go over 2 hours, and I certainly don't often get this done in 60 minutes, even with 2 players, so really 90 minutes is kind of the average you should be looking at, but this is definitely your typical midweight Euro length of around 90 to 120 minutes as a safe bet. There is a little bit of potential for analysis paralysis in this game because of the wealth of options that you have as well as the ever-changing board state, so certainly if you've got players that are used to waiting until it's their turn before they start thinking, you might want to hold off playing this with them because really this is a game that requires you to be engaged throughout, and you will be. There's plenty enough you can do on your turn that you shouldn't be sitting there going, well, I know exactly what I'm going to do for the next 3 turns, I'll be fine. Nope, because you're going to be picking up opportunities as they arise, therefore you need to be engaged and you need to be thinking in advance. Do not be put off by how giant this rulebook is. It is a beast, but that is because it has large font and a ton of pictures to reference all the examples as well as a bunch of reference lists at the back. And I dare say one of the best rulebooks I've seen for a midweight Euro, mainly because of the sheer amount of reference aids it has to have in the back of the book because of all the machines, the upgrades and the cards that you've got, as well as the smorgasbord of iconography that are in this game. Now, granted, that may put off a few people by thinking it's overly complex. However, the reference aids clearly explain what everything does, and a lot of the iconography in this game is very intuitive. A lot of the times I didn't have to explain many abilities because the players I was with already guessed what they did. You just have the book in order to, like, shall we say, be certain of what it is you're doing. Now granted, I would have liked, as a nitpick, would have liked some player aids to be available for people individually so that I could look at my own thing rather than having to pass the book around, but can you imagine how big that reference aid would have to be if you had to do it for 4 players? There's a lot you need to know in this game in terms of abilities, so honestly I think it's good that they just had a very clear and concise section at the back of the book to say, here's what all the upgrades do. Here's the 3 that are on offer, they do these, and then as a new one comes out, you simply just flip open the page and read it out to players. I didn't have trouble teaching this one at all, and thankfully the players that I've been playing it with didn't have much trouble learning it either. So we've started off pretty well, and it's going to get better. For tactics and strategy, this is a great engaging Euro. You've got a lot of options on your turn. Yes, the turn sequence is easy. Do I put out an airship to this place, or do I retrieve them and get to the ability to build? But it bears a little bit of similarity to something like the Manhattan Project series. I mean, funny enough, Luke Laurie designed one of those. But essentially, it's a dynamic worker placement system. You have 3 airships of different sizes, and the different sizes matter because if you're trying to put them on the central grid, you've only got so much space to work with, and you can trigger less or more machines depending on which airship you use. But on top of that, you don't have to place all your airships out before you retrieve them. I always love it when games throw in this fluid system of how workers come back and forth. Not just the saying, put out 4, retrieve 4, put out 4, retrieve 4. This one is a case of, right, well I'll put out what workers I need to and then retrieve when I need to. So spaces may be clogged up for you for a while, but then on occasion you might only have to put up with one turn where somebody nicks your spot and it's like, oh, it's freed up now, right, I'm jumping in. Now, if you're not a fan of the whole polyomino scaffolding thing of Tetris tiles being put on a grid, don't worry because that's a fairly small aspect of this game. Yes, you'll score victory points if you can get your Tetris pieces to line up with others. You know, the more sides that touch another machine or scaffold, the more points you get, but that's a pretty small mechanic. It's easy to deal with. You've only got 3 different shapes and they're fairly standard Tetris shapes, so don't feel like if you're not a fan of that whole genre that this is going to be a massive focus point for the game, because really it's all about the machines, the airships workers, and what you do with those combos that you create. But I love how you can have such a wide variety of those combos with the different machines that come out. You've got so many different branches to victory that you can try every single game. Do I go focus heavily on machines? Well, okay, I'll go and do that then. Do I want to grab a bunch of those cards for bonuses? Okay, I can do that. Shall I just concentrate on building the scaffolding and getting a lot of points? Maybe build the scaffolding nice and neat so that machines can go down and promote my workers? Or maybe I'll be a bit of a nuisance and build the scaffolding in such a weird way that people will struggle to fit any machine on the board. So the main enjoyment you get out of this game, which is like the main fun I have with this, is just how you utilize all those machines, how you position the grid, and how you land your airships around it to get the best bonuses. That is always rewarding and fun as you do it. Now, if this thing doesn't appeal to you, then this is not a game you're going to go for. But if you're a fan of engine building games and finding these cool combos to do, this is essentially like a game purpose made for you. I love how I've got all these different opportunities for what to do, and this is at the start, mid-game, and end-game. At the start, there's not a lot to do in the middle, so you just slowly build it up while going around the outside of the board. But then in the mid-game, there's a lot of different machines to do and a lot of cool stuff to use. But then in the end-game, you start getting the more powerful machines turning up, but then of course you've got the flood level rising, which makes some of the previous machines obsolete. So all throughout, it feels like there's a good game arc flowing, but also no part of the game feels like another part of the game. You start off at the beginning and think, oh, this is a very different feel to how the end of this game is going to feel. It's not just rinse repeat throughout the whole game. It is legitimately a decent arc that flows from start to finish.
Damn, I'm possessed!
Whistle Stop and Whistle Mountain have a kind of unique art style to their own. It's very striking, it's very vibrant. Yes, it's not like it's got, you know, Happy Tree style artwork all over the place. It's just very functional artwork, but it is still very bright and colourful and does the job in graphic design terms of being clear to read at all points. There is no place on the board where you should have trouble understanding what something does. It's all clearly laid out. And the component quality is pretty sweet as well. You've got the etched out custom player boards that clearly lay out the turn sequence for you, have spots for the upgrades as well as your special ability. On top of that, you've got the different resource pieces, you've got the scaffolding tiles, you've got the machine machine tiles, which are pretty thick and sturdy. It is a solid production all round, really. If anything, and I'm nitpicking here like crazy, possibly the whole water level rising part with putting the tile on top of the little brown, almost kind of like mini ray scaffolding thing that's in the center of the board, that's a little fiddly to work with at times, but not to the extent where you have trouble putting it on all the time and it's going to knock things over. It's just, you just need to take a little bit of extra care putting that on. But for the most part, it did a pretty good job, and as I say, I am really nitpicking here. Don't feel that this is going to be a rich thematic experience, because it is essentially a point salad Euro. Even the fact that you've got workers swimming around in the whirlpool at the bottom is kind of a weird disconnect. You know, you're happily, merrily building up this machine and the scaffolding in the central grid, all the while your friends are drowning in a whirlpool below, and you're kind of deciding, well, I technically should go save them, but I just need to put together this combobulator machine up here. I'll be with you in just a second. It's like, that's a little bit of a weird disconnect.
Now, there'll be plenty of time to discuss your objections when and if you return.
But, as I say, it tends to generate more humour than anything else, rather than actually put people off the game, so what can you do? Now, I've been waiting to talk about longevity, because, I'm going to get into such a rave here. This is, well, imagine that for each criteria I use, duration, ease of play, I will come up with a benchmark game for what I measure other games against. Whistle Mountain, well done, you just made the cut for the benchmark game for replay value when it comes to a midweight Euro. Wow! I mean, let's just start off with the machines and stuff that you can build. So, in the basic game, you've got a decent amount of small, medium and large machines. You won't see them all every game. You've got a decent amount of cards, a decent amount of upgrades, and the scaffolding tiles are just there. They're just generic pieces, so that's not a thing. And you've got a fair wad of player abilities. Again, you will not see every single one every game. So there's already good variety. Basic game. Advanced game, you then add to every single one of those piles. There is more abilities, more machines, more cards even, and more upgrades. So when you play the advanced version, and by advanced I just mean that the abilities are not quite as crystal cut as other ones in terms of making them work well, you have a lot there. You will not see everything every game, and I dare to say after a few games you still won't see everything. But that's just the content alone. That central grid is really what makes this game shine, because it builds up differently every game depending on player count or how many players there are, or even what the players decide to do for their tactics, then you're going to get a fundamentally different feeling game all the time. Even if the same machines came out, the way that thing builds will dictate how well the machines combo with each other. It's no good having two machines that clearly combo if one of them's at the bottom left and the other one's at the top right of the grid. They're miles away from each other. Play the same game and they're in the center, and suddenly you've got yourself an interesting combo. And that's what every game of Whistle Mountain feels like, a completely different experience. So in summary, I have to feel a slight modicum of sadness here. A little bit depression as well, because I wish that I could have played this game at the end of 2020 when I should have played it. Wow, this game is good. This is a good game. This is one that would have easily got onto my top 10 of 2020. This will be on the retrospective for this later this year. I guarantee you it will be. This is a well-designed and smooth, like buttery smooth Euro game. Yes, there are occasional little nitpick flaws with it, but we're talking nitpicks here. There's a lot of iconography and a lot of stuff in the reference aids to look up. It's all clearly laid out and there's no FAQ moments, so, you've just got to look it up in the book. How's that any different from a heavy Euro? Here, you've also got maybe the occasional ability that might be a little bit too powerful, but then it depends how they turn up, how many players there are, and even your subjective viewpoint as to what you consider too powerful. But those are quickly, swept away when you think about all the positives this has. This doesn't take longer than 2 hours to play. Great midweight Euro length. It is easy to learn. Even though that there's a lot of iconography in that, a lot of it's intuitive, and the rules themselves are pretty straightforward with a fantastic rulebook to go with it. The tactics and strategy, all the options that you have in this game for what combos you can make, the different upgrades that you can grab, your different paths to victory, it's got loads of different things that you can think about on your turn, and it's just interesting and fun throughout. It already looks great, it has a good functional art style with very good component quality. Nothing is of poor quality in this game. This is kind of Bezier Games is doing a pretty good job on this at this point. Yeah, okay, there's not much of a theme to speak of, but then did Pulsar 2849 have much of a theme? No. When it comes to engine building games, I don't place as much relevance on the theme because chances are you can't really do the theme that well in an engine building game. And then longevity, wow, this game will will keep me entertained for a long time, because it will be like, I don't think I will live to the point where I see every potential setup and combination and sort of pathway that this game can offer. It does just about everything a midweight Euro should do if you're trying to appeal to me. This is pretty much, I mean, it's got Luke Laurie's name on the title. You might as well cross out Scott Caputo and cross out Laurie and just put designed for Luke. And then maybe put Hector at the end. Whatever, you know, you should just have that on the box, because that's what this game is. This is one of my favourite Euros I have played in a long time, and I am gutted I didn't play it before the end of 2020, so I could put it on that top 10 list. I'm giving it its due course now. This is getting easily an astounding 10 out of 10 for me, with a seal of distinction. This is just a very cool, fun game, and like I say, it's not necessarily the most original concept, you know, build machines and combo them to get victory points, but everything around that central grid and all the variety that this game offers just means that it never grows stale, and that's the key thing to draw from. You can get some engine building games where it feels kind of like the same engine every time. Here, the engine is going to be different every single time, and that is such a good thing to have in a midweight Euro. When I play this, I want to play it straight away afterwards. Only games that score a 10 out of 10 from me are the sort of titles where after I've played it once, I immediately want to play it again, no questions asked. This is probably my favourite title from Bezier Games, and going up against Suburbia, that's saying something. It's amazing, 10 out of 10. It is what I consider, for midweight Euro fans who are into engine builders, a must buy. I don't think I can give it any more praise than that, and it's refreshing to finally have a game that I can talk in such high praise over. That's all I can say. I better stop now before I go into a complete rave on this. So that's it for me. I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review. Don't forget to check out the Zatu code in the description for 5% discount off any number of games if you shop on their website. If there's a gap on your shelf that needs filling, consider filling it now and fill it up with a game of your choice, preferably this one. So until next time, I'll see you on the next Broken Meeple review, and remember, as always, no matter how much I buzz about it, it's still only a game. Take care, everyone.